Neoliberalism and Karl Marx. Neoliberalism is the freedom of capital, the freedom of industry, the freedom of trade, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, and here we will see the opinion of Karl Marx and why he supported neoliberalism. In his famous discourse on free trade, Karl Marx expressed, "I vote, gentlemen, in favor of free trade." For many this statement by Marx is surprising, or they consider it a quote out of context or something isolated. The opposite happens. Elsewhere he would write, free trade is a progressive stain, or free trade increases the productive forces. Throughout his studies on societies, and in particular on the capitalist society of his time, Marx always showed an admiration for the productive forces that capital aroused in the idle lands of monarchy and feudalism. In his work Capital, Marx spends little time analyzing customs economic policy and its repercussions, free trade versus protectionism. This task was carried out in a series of writings in which he was always in favor of free trade. He took England as an example, given that it was the most advanced country. Here Marx tells us that but of all countries it is again England that provides the classic example, because it occupies the first place in the world market, because only here the capitalist mode of production has fully developed, and, finally, because the introduction of the millenary kingdom of free trade, from 1846, stripped the vulgar economy of its last refuge. 1. Value produced in the world of manufacturing 1750 to 1900. Where you see the takeoff of England due to the Industrial Revolution in 1840, plus as the United States of America does the same 40 years later. He mocks the free traders a little, however, by calling them the enlightened mercakefles of free trade too. Free trade, neoliberalism, globalization, or global trade is not a new phenomenon. Marx relates it emotionally from his first journalistic writings, through the famous Communist Manifesto, to the last thing he wrote. It narrates the great doors of commerce that Christopher Columbus opened, and how the grandeur of the Industrial Revolution flooded the world of the 19th century with cheap English goods. It is very illustrative how England strove to increase its profits by expanding its culture and way of working. Here we see an example of this. At the quarterly meeting of the Manchester Chamber of Commerce this afternoon, there was a heated debate on the problem of free trade. A motion was tabled according to which, as it has been hoped in vain, for 40 years, that other nations will follow the free trade example given by England, this House understands that the time has come to reconsider that position. By only one vote of difference the proposal was rejected. The vote was 21 in favor and 22 against 3. On the following phrase, the era of free trade did not improve, however, the real wage of the working class we occupy nothing more than comparing the purchasing power of the English working class of 1870 and the present. The real and relative wage and its purchasing power increased to levels unthinkable since 1870, as can be seen in Hans Rosling's video. For where you see the rapid improvement of England's standard of living but the rapid rise even of the most lagging countries. 5. Many empires have passed in the world and English domination and hegemony came to an end, being replaced by America. As Marx points out, free trade has already exhausted its discretions. Even Manchester questions that age-old economic gospel. Rapidly developing foreign industry everywhere looks with a gesture of defiance at English production, and not only in the areas protected by customs duties, but also in neutral markets and even on this side of the Channel. 6. This note is very appropriate to the times we live in, where the Western culture of capital labor or American style has spread to China, India, and Africa, because by adopting American forms of labor and capital threaten certain branches and sectors of the American economy. Thanks to the Internet, the know-how of technologies, sciences, tricks, trade secrets, business secrets, and an unparalleled ease of trade and payments are quickly spread to the most remote village in Africa or China. We live in hyper-free trade, hyper-capitalism, or cyber-capitalism. but as we have seen they were temporary phenomena or waves of free trade followed by protectionism, where clearly for Marx and Engels free trade is the enhancer of the productive forces of society. However, free trade is not the panacea for all. Free traders so full of religious anointing, dripping with love of neighbors. 7. No matter who is the elected representative of a country, or the will of some tycoon or several of them who wish to impose their point of view on the development of a country, they are nothing more than the expression of the general needs of movement or restriction of capital. But in general this does not depend on the good or bad will of the individual capitalist either. Free competition imposes the immanent laws of capitalist production, against the individual capitalist, as a coercive external law. 8. In general, any president of the United States would be forced to pursue a very similar domestic or foreign economic policy. The assumption that the capitalist mode of production has taken over agriculture implies that it dominates all spheres of production and bourgeois society, that is to say also its conditions, such as free competition of capitals, transferability of the same from one sphere of production to the other, equal level of average gain, etc., are present throughout their maturity. 9. Comments. The country, state, or region most free of obstacles of all kinds, feudal, fiscal, mentality, land ownership, freedom of movement of human capital, monetary is the one that manages to develop at an accelerated pace. Under no excuse should the free development of the productive forces of capital be stopped, is one of Marx's great teachings. Where the most complete freedom is requested so that capital and personal initiative prosper as quickly as possible. Notes. Karl Marx,
Capital Book First, Volume 3.